Hello, and welcome to our Social Connection in the Time of COVID-19 webinar series. Today, we'll be discussing switching to virtual mentoring, some practices for maintaining connections, and sharing programmatic responses to the needs of youth during this pandemic. We hope all on this call sharing resources with creating a communal environment for sharing and connecting with one another. Next slide. On this page here is just a snapshot of the many organizations that are joining us today. We'd like to welcome you, our partners from diverse mentoring programs, schools, and youth development organizations from all across the country. Many of you join Mentor for our quarterly national organization calls, which we hold to provide updates on ways to engage and collaborate as a part of the mentoring movement. This discussion series is an extension of those quarterly calls, and we wanted to include many local programs in this discussion as those of you who are working to respond to this pandemic every day. Please use the chat box to introduce your name, where you are in the country, and your organization. Slide. So on our agenda today, we will review some of the lessons and challenges we have been hearing from the field. We will also provide an overview of what Mentor is doing and some resources we want to spotlight. You will hear from our affiliate leader in Vermont, who will discuss their efforts to support programs in their state. In addition to our affiliate network voice, we also welcome two great panelists from local mentoring programs who present on the topic of how they have navigated their organization and programmatic decision-making in transitioning to virtual mentoring. Thank you to both Bethany of America Scores and Isabella from the Youth Mentoring Action Network for joining us today. We also have two other non-panelists who will actually share from the field a little bit later as well. After a brief Q&A, we will transition to informal sharing time. We will curate the questions and responses and share any relevant information after this call. We will then close out with some important next steps, including dates from our two upcoming calls. Next slide.
I just want to make sure everyone knows, hi, this is Ellie from Mentor National. To make sure if you are posting in the chat, to make sure it goes into the chat box and not the question box. I got quite a few responses there, and no one else can see those but me, I don't think. So make sure you you go to the chat box and select all entire audience.
Great. Thank you, Ellie. And this call is being recorded for those who registered and were unable to attend as well. The presentation portion of this call may be shared as a resource on our website as well, but not the informal share section during the end. So a few housekeeping. A few reminders about the call today and how to best participate. So everyone has been muted to protect the sound quality of the webinar. However, we want you to participate in a few ways. This call is for you. So we want you to share resources, ideas, concerns, and questions, again, in the chat box, which appears throughout the webinar. If you haven't already, please introduce yourself in your chat box again with your name, organization, and where you're located in the country. There will be time for question and answer after the panelists speak. I will now turn it over.
Sorry, I just found out there is no public chat box on GoToWebinar, apparently.
Okay, well, great. So everything will go. All right. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Elizabeth Santiago, who is our Chief Program Officer, for some words of encouragement and high-level themes about what we have been hearing from the field.
Hi, thank you, Desiree, and thank you, Ellie. And good afternoon, everyone. We so appreciate you all being here today. It looks like we have over 250 participants, which is amazing, so thank you. We've received so many emails and phone calls from mentoring programs across the country who are working hard to respond to the needs of the young people they serve, as well as the families, mentors, and communities impacted by this crisis. We've been so inspired by the passion and motivation of mentoring practitioners to respond to young people's urgent needs during this time. So thank you again. Thank you all for your work and commitment. It's been truly amazing. We've also been hearing lots of the same questions, like how do we stay connected with or connected to youth and families and help youth stay connected with mentors while we remain physically distant? And how do we keep them connected with staff and mentors in safe ways through virtual means? Another theme that we've been hearing is around supporting families who have limited access to phone and internet as we transition to virtual means or online or e-mentoring. And how do we help families get the concrete resources they need? So many of you are building the plane as you're flying it, as we are as well. So we knew we needed to create this space for practitioners to connect, pose questions, and hear from others about the approaches, the solutions you're finding through this crisis. We hope you'll find something useful on this call, and we hope that you'll share your own approaches and resources. Remember, we're all in this together, and we are all learning together. So as you are sharing resources and ideas, you can use the chat box. According to Ellie, it's not going to display to everyone, but we will share any resources or approaches as we collect them. We can send them after this call if that's the best thing to do. And I wanted to note that Mentor has been partnering closely with OJJDP. So Ellie, if you move to the next slide, please. And together we have launched a resource page on the NMRC website. We are also encouraging any mentoring program who needs support in adapting their programming to fit the current needs of youth and families to apply for no-cost coaching and support from the NMRC's National Network of Technical Assistance Providers. We are ready to support you during this crisis, so please take advantage of this resource. Again, it's free to you, so please request technical assistance if you need it. So we've been completely floored by the response we've been getting to this discussion series and the incredible passion and responsiveness of all of you. So thank you for being on today's call. And please, again, use your time or this time today to share your thoughts, questions, concerns, so that we can continue to figure out the best ways to support you. So I'll turn it back to Desiree to take us to the next section of this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. We will now highlight a few resources that we want to make available to you during this time. You can advance to the next slide. Thank you. Through a survey, Mentor created and disseminated a survey to mentoring programs and affiliates to assess the challenges and questions that they are facing, called Mentoring in a Time of Social Distancing, Mentoring Organizations Survey. We want to share a few of the Survey 1 results. As you can see on the screen, a high percentage of mentoring programs are actually interested in tech solutions that provide safe and monitor one-on-one kind of communication. So child safety is key for organizations right now in this time. The other part, 86% of mentoring programs stated that barriers with availability and access to this technology are actually keeping them from transitioning to virtual mentoring options. Next slide, please. And so being able to think about the survey findings, as you see on our screen, we already talked about a lot of the respondents. They are transitioning and figuring out how to do virtual remote mentoring and leveraging great products such as Zoom, Skype, text messaging, and Canvas. Again, depending on program specifications. Resources needed include, like, how do you actually keep matches engaged? What are some educational activities to supplement school learning, as many of the schools have gone to virtual platforms? Next slide, please. And just a reminder, you'll be able to actually have access to the survey through after the actual webinar has concluded. We'll send a link out for you. We know that some programs are still onboarding new matches during this time. We encourage the continued use of screening practices, including background checks, what may be delayed due to closures and the stay-at-home orders. In our follow-up survey, we ask about interest in one-time mentoring events to gauge interest in connecting young people to adults during this time, such as career events. If you're unable to onboard, screen, and train new mentors, you can leverage the staff supervised virtual events or recruit volunteers for instrumental community service activities like food distribution following the latest health product protocols. The elements of effective practice and mentoring are still crucial steps to maintain at this time for your program, in addition to reminding your matches of your program policies and procedures, including any adaptations made for the current moment. Programs put incredible intentionality into policies and procedures, and these are important to lean on now. Please leverage the NMRC TA for support with onboarding new mentors and tips, templates for adjusting policies around communications between matches as needed. So just a quick reminder, child safety is a top priority for all programs. So again, we recommend testing and leveraging the latest safety protocols from tools such as Zoom, which now allow you to screen all attendees in waiting rooms prior to joining a virtual event. Our main location for our suite of resources is the Mentor COVID-19 website link, which you see up on your screen. On this page, you will find the following: tips for mentors on how to connect with young people and our resource for leveraging text-based messaging practices. You also find e-mentoring resources, including our Elements of Effective Practice for Mentoring supplement for programs who have already leveraged e-mentoring fully or as part of a hybrid approach with an in-person meeting. Mentors Advocacy and Policy Response, including information on the CARES Act and ways you can advocate, can also be found on the website. There are also FAQs that highlight some of our organizational responses and a curated list of resources and tools that we are finding for programs, mentors, and families. Our entire mentor network is here to help, so please reach out to us at the national office or your local mentoring affiliate, leveraging the NMRC Technical Assistance Portal. We also have virtual mentoring portals, which we'll talk about in our next slide. To ensure physical distancing does not mean social disconnection, leading experts on mentoring launched the virtual mentoring portals. The virtual mentoring portals are safe and monitored mentoring platforms for mentors and mentees to continue their relationships while they may be separated due to COVID-19. I could be one of the leading experts on virtual mentoring in the US since 2000 and mentor the nation's field and movement leader for youth mentoring for the last 30 years, join forces to develop this free tool for youth 13 and older. The virtual mentoring portal provides unstructured, which is internal monitored email, or structured research-backed curriculum communications, and provides mentoring programs with virtual mentoring access for existing mentees and their mentors. The platform is constructed with respect to the best practices, safety, and data privacy. To ensure that youth 12 and under also have access to virtual mentoring in this moment, Mentor has partnered with Cricket Together to expand the portals. Cricket Together provides a convenient, rewarding, and impactful approach to e-mentoring, connecting mentors and students virtually across the U.S. in order to overcome geographic and social economic barriers. Interested organizations will be using an existing platform developed to support children with a structured, evidence-based backed curriculum, and participating program staff will have access to an administrative portal that will enable them to manage the program and review mentee and mentor participation and communication on the VMP. Please submit an interest form through the posted website if you would like to leverage one of these platforms. If you are serving youth in both age groups, please complete both interest forms and both onboarding processes. You will find FAQs and informational webinars on our website. Next slide. Now I want to introduce and open up the floor to Chad Butt, who is the Executive Director for Mentor Vermont and Chair for our Advisory Council here at Mentor. Thank you, Chad.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Once again, I'm Chad Butt from Mentor Vermont, and I just wanted to share a little bit more about what Mentor Vermont, as an affiliate for Mentor National, supporting mentoring programs throughout Vermont, has been doing during this time to really support the mentoring programs we serve. So to provide a little context, Mentor Vermont supports about 30 mentoring agencies in the state of Vermont that run about 140 mentoring program sites around the state. We provide them with resources and support so they can meet the needs of the young people in their communities. Since March 16th, Mentor Vermont has been advocating with mentoring programs and supporting them and suspending in-person mentoring based on the guidelines that our state and our governor had put out with suspending schools at that time. So we, as a small state, have been able to actually check in with all the mentoring programs that we work with and really helping them with the immediate focus that they all had during this time of first ensuring that during this time of upheaval, the mentor matches that they had already set up, we're able to continue to rely on the communication, and the mentees are able to rely on connection with a caring, consistent adult with their mentor as they have over the years. Secondly, just trying to make sure that programs are trying to make sure that the families that they serve had the resources they need and were safe, had food, were able to pay rent, and sort of the immediate needs of those families. And so mentoring programs were working with other community partners and in some situations transitioning a little bit into helping support food access as well, but really being that connector that mentoring programs naturally are with the youth they serve as a trusted source of information. We wanted to make sure that mentoring programs had the resources around translated materials so that mentors and their mentees could and their families could read in to learn more about the resources available and also other information about COVID-19. We also are working with programs to make sure that the pandemic doesn't further amplify inequity. With remote learning, we have a lot of difficulty in Vermont around actual access to internet connectivity, and really just trying to make sure that in all aspects, the pandemic isn't amplifying the inequity that we see already within Vermont. And then finally, with sort of the immediate response, we started hosting weekly gatherings for mentoring coordinators. Most of our coordinators are one-person shop. They run mentoring programs on their own, and in good times can often feel isolated as the only mentoring coordinator in that area of the state. So we've been bringing folks together on a weekly basis to have video chats, learn from one another, and really just support one another. As this has progressed, we started working with programs to look at long-term impact around financials. And so that's looked like changing the grant guidelines around the grant funding that we give out to mentoring programs. It's been providing guidance on federal loans through the CARE Act. And also just trying to advocate on behalf of mentoring with funders around the state, that mentoring really should be at the table and thought of as a long-term sort of impact. We need to see mentoring at the table as part of the recovery process for the communities that we serve. Looking forward, we are definitely working with programs to figure out how to maintain remote mentoring while in-person mentoring is not possible, and how to enhance that while looking at trying to make sure that the programs are providing the guidance and support and meeting best practice to their mentor matches. We've also been working with programs now to develop a plan for as in-person mentoring in whatever form the new reality is for that takes shape, to develop a plan to figure out how in-person mentoring can resume when it's safe to do so and how that might look. So working with programs to develop those plans, and also really just listening to programs to be responsive of what their needs are now around mentor trainings, around resources and curriculum, and sharing all the resources that Mentor National has put out. I've been really impressed and amazed to see the responsiveness that mentoring programs in Vermont, and I'm sure around the country, have had at adapting to what is the new reality and ensuring that youth that they serve are able to turn to their mentors for support. So that's just a little summary of what things have looked like from the affiliate level and from supporting mentoring programs in Vermont.
Thank you much, Chad, for sharing. And now I want to be able to introduce our next panelist, and we'll turn things over to Bethany Henderson, who is the National Network President for America's Schools. Their related focus has been on how to sustain group mentoring with low-income elementary and middle schoolers during this time to help mentees stay safe, supported, connected, and hopeful. Bethany will share what has worked, the challenges they've encountered, and how they're continuing to work to adapt during this fluid situation.
Great, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. If you could go into my slide deck, please. So I want to start off real quick by giving everyone on the phone on this webinar the context that we work in. So if you go to the next slide, please, you'll see the scope of America Scores. We're a national nonprofit. You go ahead and pull up all the graphics. We're a national nonprofit, actually international. We work across North America, the US and Canada. And our focus is in low-income schools and Title I neighborhoods, working with children primarily ages 8 to 14, kindergarten to 14 in some cases. So what that means is that we're working with young children. We typically work in their school buildings. We run free after-school programs and summer camps for in-person normal times, and our mentoring is done in groups. It's not one-on-one. And so we'll typically have 4 mentors. We call them coaches in our parlance, in any given school building, working closely with that group of kids after school, as well as continuing to support them throughout the school day. So what happens when none of those people can actually interact with each other, as what happened when schools started shutting down? So if you go to the next slide, please. The context in which we work is after school programs and summer camps primarily, and our programming is 100% free. Our normal time program is centered around soccer leagues. So every child in one of our mentoring groups or mentee groups plays soccer in our leagues with their team, with their peers. That same team of kids with those same coaches also write and perform original poetry together and design and carry out service projects together. So it's a very intensive curricular-based group mentoring experience in which that coach, that mentor really becomes that group of kids safe space, safe person. And that group of kids, that team becomes sort of that peer mentee group, even kids as young as 5, 6, 7, finding that safety in that. So when the pandemic hit and schools closed, we were left with how do we actually reach these kids? How do we continue to help them during this time? Next slide, please. So we started, I'm gonna talk to you about what we're doing so far, what's working well, and ongoing challenges. So if you go to the next slide, what we started with was what are our North Stars during this crisis? What is the main thing that is most important to our mission that we can do? We obviously can't run soccer leagues. We can't bring teams together. There's all sorts of challenges with having coaches, go to kids' homes when that was still considered okay, or reach out one-on-one. So we decided we had 2 North Stars. One was to keep our kids feeling safe, connected, supported, and hopeful during the pandemic. And 2, to be prepared to resume in-person programming the moment it is safe to do so. We know that for many of the kids we serve, like I'm sure many of the children many of y'all serve, their home is not their safe space. It is often a space of great trauma, whether that be their home, their street, their neighborhood, whatnot, and that trauma is being compounded. And so our goal is twofold. Let kids know we're there, maintain those relationships now, and have a space, physical, emotional, for them to come back to the moment that is allowable. So if you go to the next slide, I'll start out by looking at the things we've done so far. So we've taken a lot of different tacks, and I'm not going to read everything on this list. You can read it for yourself, but we have actually tried a lot of different stuff, right? A virtual curriculum, customizing things to each city, different outreach on social media to different age groups, to parents as well, trying virtual team sessions when that's possible, doing one-on-one outreach. And while it may feel like we're throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall, it's because we're throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall, right? Right now, for the first few weeks, our goal was really to see what is going to work, what is sticky, what is helpful, what do our kids respond to, what do our families respond to, what can our kids access, what can our families access. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we actually customize in each of our cities, because those individual relationships between the program staff, the mentors in that city are so important, different outreach portals. And we actually experimented in different communities with what that looks like. And you'll get this deck afterwards. So you'll be able to click through and see all these portals if you're interested. But if you go to the next slide, what you'll see is that we started with how do we support our mentors? What kind of guidance can we give our mentors to run a virtual session, to do a phone call, to reach out to kids? And so building on the great materials created by mentor.org and others, we created very specific to our program guidance for our mentors, for our coaches, to help them connect successfully to kids in this world. Because remember, none of our mentors are used to operating in this world with kids either. In the America Scores world, most of our mentors are also school teachers or school staff doing the equivalent of a second mentor shift with us. And so for them, it's been a complete 180 of how they operate in their day-to-day life, let alone how they operate with their mentee groups. And so we started by giving mentors guidance. We also, if you go to the next slide, created a variety of online curriculum that mentors could use with their mentee groups to structure those conversations, right? Knowing that kids are going through a lot of trauma, how do we help them process some of the the impact of that trauma. How do we help them remain resilient socially and emotionally in the face of all of this, knowing that technological divide is an issue, as other folks have said. So if you look at this slide, you'll see an example of a printable on the left that anybody can just print out from their computer, and a kid can do at home, they can do by themselves, they can do at the parent. In the middle is an example of something we might post on social media. Again, it's kind of a straight shot. Here's kind of your 4 steps that you can just do, or a parent or older sibling can help read you through, and you can knock it out on your own. We designed everything for kids to be able to also do on their own if they are not able to connect with their mentor, so they still feel connected to the larger program. Because we work in mentee groups, that America Scores identity is very relevant to our kids. It's something that they feel very strongly about. That's very much a sense of their identity. And so we wanted, with each of the curricula, we designed it so that a coach could work through it with a kid could work through it on their own, a kid could work through it with their parent or an older sibling. We also have some interactive. We've been playing around with what interactive stuff looks like for the kids who do have tech access. And that's what you see on the upper right, Life Doesn't Frighten Me, the poetry quest. Through our Bay Area program, we actually have experimented with a number of poetry and soccer quests, and the kids can actually type in to, it's not a Google form, it's fancier than that, but it's kind of what you might think of as a Google form, you know, cutely done up for kids every step of the way. So that's something someone is guiding them, even if they're not able to connect directly with their mentor for whatever reason. And then last, we have a lot of little video shorts. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is to show the kids how it's possible to be done, to do things like juggling a soccer ball in your home or making a soccer ball. For many of our kids who don't even have access to that equipment, we actually have a video on that as well. But also for the kids to see their coaches' faces asynchronously, to see their mentors' faces. We want to make sure that the kids can see people, not just have this sort of less personal text content, but that they can actually see folks that they know that they can identify with, that makes them feel good and connected, even if the only time they can do that is 6 in the morning or 8 at night and not the time their group is meeting. If you go to the next page, please. What's working well? So multidimensional outreach is working well. Our mentors and our mentees all have various levels of tech knowledge, tech capacity, and tech access. And so we have found that it's truly, we have to reach out to folks sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 times by different ways before we're able to get a hold of them and support them. 2, being in close contact with our mentors and involving them in that virtual session design, adapting that virtual programming to both their and their mentees' daily reality. In normal times, all of our programming happens right after school at about 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon in most places. Well, 3:30 p.m. in our world, I don't know how many of you have kids at home. I have kids at home who I am supporting through their own homeschooling, and by 3:30 p.m. they're blitzed. They've been on the screens all day. Getting out and running around as opposed to sitting down with another person on another screen is often important. Or maybe their sibling has something they have to do at 3:30 p.m. and they're sharing a device. So adapting that programming, both the content, the structure, and the timing to mentees' daily reality based on our conversations with mentors and mentees has been working really well. Using staff in lieu of mentors. A lot of our mentors, as I said, are school teachers. A lot of them have children at home. They are not able to keep up that 4-day-a-week mentee group management the way that they did in quote unquote normal times, pre-pandemic times. And so we're involving our staff more in that. Our staff are creating videos, our staff are hosting sessions, and our staff are all trained and background checked also, right? They're often in the fields in regular time. And so rather than put as much burden on our mentors, we're asking the mentors, what can we do to help make your life better? Can we run a session for you? Can we provide you videos of X, Y, and Z? Can we design something for you that you can plug and play? And really using our staff to do things that mentors previously did for us. Piggybacking on our partner schools distance learning platform. So we work across 300 some odd schools across over a dozen school districts. Even within those districts, often individual schools use different technologies, different distance learning platforms. So making sure that we're in close contact with our schools, that we're able to hook in our programming to their distance learning platform as often as possible has worked well. And in fact, in Vancouver, we've had tremendous success with that. We have a significant percentage of our kids voluntarily logging on by themselves every day to work through our curricula because it's easy, it's there, it's connected to their school stuff. Virtual team sessions by video chat or social media when possible. When you're talking about relationships, as we talk about in the mentoring world, there's nothing that replaces some semblance of face-to-face. And so doing that, not daily, but weekly, maybe once or twice a week, when it's possible for as many kids as possible matters. And then inviting mentees to share their, we call it quote unquote work product, right? So share their videos of themselves dribbling with their team, share their poems that they've written with their team, facilitating that interactivity that is so important in our group mentoring experience normally. And the last slide I'll share with you is our challenges. So what have we found that's an ongoing challenge? The digital divide, I know it's been mentioned already today, huge challenge, even in somewhat resourced cities. Many of our kids don't have devices of their own. Many of our kids have internet access challenges. Many of our kids are sharing one device with multiple siblings who all are doing distance learning and stuff at the same time. And that's a challenge just that has been exacerbated by this. Two, the impact of this trauma affecting mentees' ability. So most of the mentees that we work with already are fairly high on the childhood ACEs scale. But for many of them, that is now compounded trauma. Hunger, childcare responsibilities, absent parents. They may have the time, they may have the device, but don't have anybody to tell them how to log on, how to troubleshoot the tech, how to help them figure out how to manage their time, how to get the soccer ball out of the storage bin, whatever it is. That's important, and that's a challenge that we have found continues to be a problem. Mentor availability capacity. As I said, a lot of our mentors, this is their quote unquote second job. They're struggling with their own daily jobs. They're struggling with their own families. How do we support them in being able to continue supporting their mentee groups without overburdening them? 4, every partner school is operating distance learning differently, and we have to be able to adapt to each of their realities. Especially we want to ensure consistent quality of those sessions. How do we monitor that from a distance? We don't have enough staff to zoom into every single distance learning session that is happening. We don't have enough staff to be on every phone call with every mentor. So how are we ensuring consistent quality? And as we continue to evolve and adapt, the one principle that has held true is that one size definitely does not fit all when it comes to virtual mentoring in this environment. We're continually evolving how we support mentors, how we support mentees, what resources we provide for them, and how we bring them together. And I think the ultimate lesson we have learned is that being able to be nimble matters. Simply rolling out here's a program, now go do it, if it doesn't take into account the diversity of our mentor and mentees' realities, won't go anywhere. So if our goal ultimately, as I said at the beginning, is to keep kids feeling safe, connected, supported, and hopeful, continuing to evolve so that we can meet kids where they are, so we can support mentors where they are, is really important. So that's what I've got on the last slide. I just left a couple of photos for y'all of some of the sessions that we've had with our kids. If you want to flip to the next slide, as well as my contact information if folks are interested in learning more. And thank you for letting me share.
Great, thank you so much, Bethany. We will now turn things over to Isabella Chavez, Director of Programs for the Youth Mentoring Action Network, located in the Inland Empire in California, the leader in critical mentoring and promotes youth voice best practices through reimagined youth-led and multi-generational spaces. Isabella will share Iman's approaches to engaging and collaborating with their youth in social distancing times.
Okay, sorry, I had a little issue getting unmuted, but thank you so much for introducing me. My name is Isabella Chavez. I am the Program Director with the Youth Mentoring Action Network. Thank you so much to my fellow panelists. Thank you so much to Mentor for allowing us to share a platform with y'all. I'm glad to be discussing with you the ways in which we can better support young people and the ways that we are working to respond to this pandemic in a time of social distancing. Before we dive in, and this is a part of the wellness work that we do in the Youth Mentoring Action Network, I want to just acknowledge the stress that we have all been facing, the stress that we've been facing organizationally and also personally as people who care about our communities. I want to thank you so much for taking care of yourselves and also for continuing to be change makers and be people who are interested in impacting the lives of students. As Bethany said, we are all about addressing the context that young people are living in and the situations that they're working with. To talk about the Youth Mentoring Action Network and the youth that we're specifically working with, we work with a diverse student population. As a part of our Black Girls Initiative, as well as our Wellness Initiative, we've already been aiming at impacting the health lives of our young people, right? So we've already been having conversations with them about the importance of health and the impacts that it has on their academic goals, on their career goals, and just their life potential altogether. So we work mostly with high school and college age students. So we work in college and career readiness. And we also work to build critical consciousness in our young people. So what that means for us is avoiding deficit-based work and deficit-based thinking when it comes to building programs, as well as addressing the toxicity that our young people are navigating. So what this pandemic has really done is it has exacerbated and really brought a spotlight into a lot of the difficulties that our young people were already facing, right? So they were already facing issues of not having internet access. They were already facing issues of not having enough devices to complete online assignments, etc., right? And so we really our pivoting and our fluidity of this work has really sort of fallen in line with what our paradigm has already been, which is critical mentoring. And we want to build empowerment within our young people to be able to change their context as well as to change their communities. If we want to go into the next slide. All right, so what I'm going to be speaking with you all on is the programmatic goals and what we've been doing at the Youth Mentoring Action Network, which includes connecting to young people, providing space, and centering youth voice. Next slide. All right, so one of the things that is always very important is consistent communication with your young people as well as with your mentors. When recommendations for social distancing were announced, we began pivoting our work, and our first correspondence with our youth included updates on the ways in which our programs were going to be changing or otherwise suspended. And as was said earlier, there is in many cases no substitute for in-person interaction and work with our young people. And so, of course, many of our young people, on top of already having the suspension of the school events that they were looking forward to, there was also the suspension of a lot of the EMON events that we had initially planned for the end of the year. So in our pivoting, we created 3 main programmatic goals initially. The first one was You've Got Mail. And so this was a way in which we were going to send care cards and postcards to our young people from their mentors as well as the staff that cared about them. We understood that as social distancing was going to become a mainstay in our society and in youth work, we realized the need to put physical objects and just sort of tactile sort of ways that our young people can know that they were being thought of. And so that's how we developed the postcards and care cards in order for young people to sign up and receive those throughout the length of this pandemic. We also created weekly Zoom Hangouts. Now, these are cohort-based meetings to engage young people on their real lived experience, on the ways in which they were navigating the world and the ways that we can better help them. So we kind of had planned were structured, pre-planned discussions. We wanted to do resource dissemination and all of that good stuff. We also began work on our skills building beyond the classroom with EMON e-courses, right? So what we want to do is take advantage of the fact that adults are constantly saying, oh, we wish that young people sort of learned about taxes. We wish they learned how to cook. We wish that they learned all of these valuable life skills. However, our young people, in very many cases, lack the ability to have lessons, to engage in work, in order to build those skills. So we worked on building that as well. Now, as a part of our youth-centric model, we realized that in some cases we could be wrong. And when we listened to our young people, we sort of realized that we needed to be more flexible to the needs of our students. As we started to listen to them, we found out that they wanted space to just hang out and see their friends in a group setting. They wanted to connect conversationally and sort of have a sense of normalcy beyond the suspension of their classes and the suspension of their schoolwork. So that ended up informing our work and changing what we had initially sort of set up in terms of our programmatic goals. Our Zoom Hangouts became much less structured, and they became truthful Hangouts in which our young people were able to log on over the time that we had sort of set as an open air sort of platform for them to discuss. And I realized that they wanted to discuss the things that they were doing at home, a lot of which was streaming, talking about memes and social media. And so we did that together. And along with our mentors, we were able to start conversations around the content that our young people were engaging with, right? And so we were able to have conversations about what do healthy relationships look like for ourselves, but how do they also look like when you're watching, Netflix show Love is Blind, or something like that. And our young people were so ready to talk about, and truthfully, they kept asking for more time. And so we gave that to them. And so that was one of the main ways in which we've kept youth centrism and our sort of paradigm of critical mentoring at the forefront of our youth goals and our programmatic goals. If we can move on to the next slide. So another way that we've been sticking to our paradigm is bringing youth perspectives to the forefront of conversation about youth work and how we can better serve young people. So we launched our Youth Speak About COVID-19 webinar series. What we really wanted to do is give young people a platform to not just speak and connect with one another, but to inform policy, inform youth work. And it has truthfully been incredibly helpful. So many of our collaborators, so many of our partners in this field have reached out to us and told us about the ways in which our young people have shared their experience in a more structured way, right? So this is a little bit different than our Zoom Hangouts, about how they can be better served during this pandemic. We've also taken advantage of this time to connect young people to one another and sort of change the way that we're engaging in learning, change the way that we're engaging in empowerment, right? And so we're doing this digitally, and we're also doing this in a way where young people don't feel exhausted by this work. One of the things that our young people have told me so many times is that they feel a sort of like exhaustion, right? So they had already been accustomed to, you know, being on their phones and interacting online, on media, etc. But now their entire classrooms were now online. Now everything that they did had to be conducted through a computer. And so what we really realized was we need to be very strategic about the places and the touch points that we have for our young people, right? So we didn't want to have a continued fatigue of both our mentors and our young people. So this webinar series was able to sort of bridge that gap and bring our programmatic goals and our goals for impacting the field of mentoring, as well as not overexerting or adding too much of a burden to our young people. If we can go into the next slide, please. All right, so connecting to young people. So as another one of our webinar series episodes, what we included was the perspective of Asian American students in and during COVID-19. And well, actually, this webinar was born out of conversations that had begun in earlier webinars in which our Asian American students discussed the prevalence and resurgence of racism on the street, online, in media, etc. And our young Asian American students were talking about the fact that they were fearful of going outside when it was still available, and they were fearful of the ways in which they would be seen as American citizens who were now being stigmatized by this pandemic that everyone was facing. The picture that you can see in front of you right now is a photo of Jerry Fang on top of the op-ed that he wrote. And he wrote about anti-Asian bias in the United States historically, as well as how it's impacting young people and how it's impacting our society as a whole right now. One of the ways that we've been trying to make sure that our young people get access to resources is engaging our young people as employees, as webinar organizers, and as activists. And so there's an actual sort of way in which we can like put money into the hands of our young people who have actually like experienced a lot of financial hardship. Their families have also experienced financial hardship, and we've been rewarding them and giving them work that they can put onto high school resumes and sort of build into college academic careers. Now, this article was actually posted to our Mighty Works, which is something that we were actually already working on, and this project sort of came to fruition at the beginning of this time of social distancing. And if we can go into our next slide. Our Mighty Works Network is an online platform in which youth work practitioners, mentors, young people themselves are able to come together and discuss topics that are important to them and also build awareness around resources and everything in between. So it's sort of like a little bit like Facebook that's specifically for resource dissemination and conversation. And as you can see in that picture, some of the topics that we've included as important, as of note, and topics that folks are contributing to is critical mentoring, Black women and girls, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or what we like to call liberation work. Of course, COVID-19 and the issues that we're facing for that, and just general education and so on. And so Jerry Fang's op-ed did get a lot of views and a lot of traction from folks who are interested in this work. And so that's one of the other ways in which we're not only trying to connect with our young people, but we're also trying to build community around resource dissemination, around building truthful narratives that put our young people's voices at the forefront. And so again, I just want to thank all of the efforts that have been put forth by my fellow panelists, as well as the Mentor National Network. And I hope that that y'all got something out of the ways in which the Youth Mentoring Action Network has been pivoting. Like I said before, we are no exception, and we are navigating this together. And I'll hand it back over to our organizers to continue into the question and answer section.
Great, thank you so much, Isabella, and thank you to all of our panelists today. They have the information has been immensely healthy and wealth, and I want to be able to go ahead and field some questions. We have a few minutes before we go into our informal, time with you all today. And remember to add questions to the question and answer box, since we do not have the chat box on this particular webinar. So I'm gonna turn it over to Ellie to field some questions.
Okay, so I have a question from Julie Gehrig for Bethany, which is, well, it might be in general. How do you facilitate match initiation over email when you can't see that the mentor and mentee are truly connecting?
Yeah, so for us, that's a great question. Our mentee groups are built out of kids from within the same school community. So it's not a one-to-one match. We build a team of kids, and there are 4 adults from that community that we pair with that team. So we don't have that sort of individual match challenge at America Scores. Now, weirdly, for most of our programming, this shutdown happened right around the week we were launching our spring programming. We work in groups about 12-week segments. So we didn't have the ability to do kind of our traditional spring onboarding for new mentors or for kids who wanted to join in the spring who had not participated in the fall. And what we did in those circumstances was reach out to every kid in that school who has been a part of America Scores at any point in the last couple of years and say, hey, if you want to be part of America Scores again, here's what we're doing in your community. Here's how to reach us, as opposed to being too concerned about an individual match, if that makes sense.
And Bethany, what platform does America Scores use to host your curriculum?
So to host our virtual curriculum, it's individual portals, city by city, that are listed in the deck that you'll get that kind of blew through that slide. We do not have a back-end individual platform for mentee group meetings because we work with partner schools to try and use whatever platform that particular school has identified. Remember, we're working with little bitties. We're working with elementary schoolers and middle schoolers. And so in most cases, these are not kids who have a lot of access to their own devices and the ability to kind of download stuff on their own. And so we have found the way to reduce the burden on the parents and the mentors, most of whom work at the school, so already have access to the school platforms, is to follow whatever those schools' rules are. So some schools have said it's totally cool for teachers to interact with their kids by Instagram, and the teachers do group Instagram Live, and that's what we do. Some they work on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Google Classroom, and we try to allow our teachers, our mentors, to plug in to those platforms to make it as easy as possible. So we're not didactic about platform for interaction.
I have another question from Jennifer Burgoyne asking how to make sure the quarantine isn't exacerbating inequality. Have any programs implemented creative strategies to engage youth without the internet or devices, like the care card idea?
Sure. Yeah, so that's part of the reason why we developed the care card idea, in order to put physical things, in order to try every single possible thing that we can do in order to let young people know that they're being cared of and thought of, especially those who don't have access to, internet or web-enabled devices, etc. I would just really quickly caveat and say that this pandemic has already exacerbated a lot of the social inequities that we've already been seeing, specifically in our country, right? So that's always been there, and it has definitely been exacerbated. One of the things that we need to do is work around the ways in which our young people are navigating these things, and I don't have a specific answer to any question of how specifically we engage with young people in a way that is safe, that doesn't use digital media. But I mean, just things that come to mind is, again, using mail, using phone calls, using whatever limited resources that we currently have. We've also been encouraging our young people to look out for one another, right? So we've been equipping them with the social skills, with the emotional maturity skills needed to support their peers, right? So our young people, we are always asking them to be leaders, right? So we want them to find ways to connect with each other. And our young people always do, right? They'll always find a way to connect with one another and share space with one another. So what we try to do is we try to make our young people and give them the skills and tools they need to help that friend who is experiencing a high level anxiety, or help their LGBTQ classmates who are experiencing a lot of difficulty right now living at home with maybe family members that don't accept them. So again, I just want to reiterate the fact that these exacerbations do exist, and it has illuminated and worsened a lot of inequities, but we have to also remember that our young people are very, very valuable resources in this work.
Oh, yes, everything Isabella said, and I'll add two things that we have found. One is, when possible, we create printed packets of our curricula to be handed out with school packets. So a lot of our schools are actually having like pickup days every few weeks where kids can come, or a family member can come and pick up the school packet. And when our coaches are able to do it, we'll send them, or they'll print out at school their printed packets for their Scores stuff. And at least the kids have something that know, hey, Scores is thinking about you, right? Like, we're still here for the kids that we can't reach digitally. Two, we're leveraging meal sites. So over 80% of the families that we work with qualify for free or reduced lunch, meaning they're still picking up a lot of meals from the school buildings. And so we have done in our different communities, delivered our soccer balls. So we have soccer balls we're going to use this spring, trying to give every kid a soccer ball to take home with them at that meal site, delivering printed packets there as well. And then three, we've actually had some individual donors reach out and ask how they can help with immediate needs. So we've been able to pair a handful of really, really hard hit teams that have high numbers typically of undocumented families that don't qualify for federal assistance, with donors who are providing gift cards. We do that through the coach directly, rather than try to be an intermediary with individual families. Let the coach figure out how to disseminate that best, the mentor figure out how to disseminate that best to the mentees' families.
Great. Thank you all so much for your questions, and of course our panelists for your answers. Ellie, if you could skip to the next two slides for me, please. Any questions that we did not get to, we'll follow up on after the call. We are monitoring them and copying them. We will now transition into the informal share time. You can either raise your hand, add some questions using the Q&A feature, and share thoughts again, even on the Q&A. And we want to open it up this time for any and all topics. We'll start by calling on a couple of on-the-ground participants that have volunteered to go first with us. We have Jolene Burnell from Utah State University with Mentor on the Move and their tips. And next I'll call on Natalie Foster from Mentor Virginia after Jolene.
And this is Ellie again. Can I just say that two topics that many people are asking about are, one, how to get used to engage in virtual mentoring, and two, how to keep people safe during virtual mentoring, especially in one-on-one interactions.
Okay, this is Jolene Bunnell, and we run our mentoring program here in Utah, where we run it through 4-H programming. So the youth are matched either in group mentoring as in a 4-H club, or they're also mentored with a college age mentor one-on-one. And we have a program that we call Mentoring on the Move. So when our college students go back home or go on an internship or travel or whatever they do during the summer, how to keep their mentoring program going and their mentoring contact during that. So when COVID hit, we just pulled out all of our Mentoring on the Move packets, ideas, and sent that out to our mentors. And I'll just give you some examples of what are in our Mentoring on the Move packet. We have, we send them about 10 weeks worth of things, and we physically give each of those mentors a packet of things that would have little items in it with a list of 10 ideas to how to use those. And I'll just share what some of those are. And out of that 10 list, one we have I've Been Everywhere, and it has postcards in it. So they have postcards that they send to their kids when they're traveling or gone. One was a Kool-Aid packet, and they would send a little note that week and send them a Kool-Aid packet and say how cool they are and have a drink on them with their family. And we have kindness stickers, and the stickers, they have sent 3 stickers, and every time they do an act of kindness, the parent, or they award them to their parents if the parents did something nice for them or their siblings, or the mentor will call and check in to see if they did 3 acts of kindness that next following week. Another idea was, how does your garden grow? And we sent a seed packet, and they planted things in their garden at the beginning of the year, and then they would have eat it together when they got back from the summer break. A puzzle, we've done it different ways. This last time we sent out, we gave the mentor a puzzle and had them put it together and write a special note to the kid, to their mentee on the back, and then undid it and then gave it to their kid, and their mentee had to do the puzzle and to find out what the note was on the back. We had certain games that they could play digitally together online. And then we did an birthday card. So we had birthday cards in there, and then whether it was the real birthday or a half birthday or just celebrating an unbirthday, they would get a birthday card during that summertime. So we did the same thing with COVID-19, and they wanted me to share about those ideas of how we engage them. I think it's really important to not just fall back on just doing online type of things, that you still need to have some other relational touch points, like these physical things that you're doing. And some of the things that we've done to keep that going is like these Mentor on the Move packets. And then in our 4-H club meetings, 4-H has a lot of things, that resources. So a lot of our site coordinators and staff have been dropping off weekly packets of activities to their families to do. They're just leave it on their doorstep, and then their mentors call and check in on what their projects they're doing in 4-H and what those activities are that they're completing. So those are just some of the ideas that we have been doing. And I just wanted to read a quote from one of our site coordinators. 4-H has still been successful running this way. I feel it has brought us closer and even more personable due to the distancing and wanting or needing any social relationships. We're building stronger and stronger relationships by just all reaching out and working on it. So I think there's a lot of ways to be successful in this social distancing, to still have strong developmental relationships, and that strong relationships between the mentors and the mentees.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jolene. And Natalie, are you able?
Yes. I was
okay, great. Thank you.
This is Natalie Foster with Mentor Virginia. Thank you for letting me share some of the challenges that are coming from the field, from different program partners in the Virginia affiliate of Mentor. So we have been holding some town halls to kind of hear what's going on in the field. And one of the learning points that we received from one of our program partners is that they had, really done a good job of mentor training in this virtual space. And then when it was the time for the mentor and the mentees to come together, they were using Zoom platform at that time, that only one mentee ended up showing up at that exact time. And so one of the learnings that they had is that actually they needed to do a mentee training too on, kind of this virtual space. I think we just assume that young people know what to do with the technology and, when to be there, but it is very different. We explained on one of our kind of webinars that the young people are used to us coming, or as mentors coming to them at a specific time. And this is very different now. The mentee, if you're in a virtual space, has to be accountable for getting online at a certain time, and so that was one of the takeaways, is really to incorporate a mentee training as well to prepare for the match to make it successful. And then another one of our partners really wanted to talk about closure and what that looks like in the virtual space, because this had kind of been an unplanned, stopping point. They're working a little bit more on virtual, but some of our program partners are having to say goodbye to their mentees virtually. And so how could they still celebrate in that way, to learn and celebrate and thank each other, and future planning if they could stay in contact. So we have been providing trainings for folks also in, closure training, either to if you can't do a video message, to write a letter, and that importance of things. And, so those were some of the takeaways that we received from in the field.
Thank you so much, both to Jolene and Natalie, for sharing. And want to open up again for a couple of questions. We do have enough time for some, hand. You want to raise your hand and you can be unmuted, or if you have actually put some questions in the question box, I will turn it over to Ellie.
We do have a whole bunch of questions in the question box. A lot of people are wondering how to address safety when it comes to the online mentoring, especially in one-on-one situations, and how that could be monitored or in any way to ensure safety.
And if our panelists answer that, that'd be great. If you're
so this is Bethany. We don't do one-on-one, we do groups, so that helps a little bit. And there's actually some great information that was put out by Safe Sport, I think recently, about how to kind of apply the safety rules that they focus on in the online world. We actually talked about this a lot, even in the group environment, and how do we make sure that the interactions the mentors and mentees are having follow our protocols and practices. We did digging into to what extent COPPA or other online privacy laws apply to our work now that it's sort of gone into this virtual world, and make sure we're in compliance with those too. Ultimately, as a practical matter, what we came down to is if we're going to trust an adult to be with a group of kids that we cannot be physically checking up on every day, it should be no different trusting that adult to meet with that group of kids virtually. If we're going to trust an adult to have an individual conversation with a child, it should be no different if we're trusting that adult to reach out to that kid. Most of them, they have to go through the parents anyway, because we work with really little kids. It's an imperfect solution and one that we continue to explore, but we kind of thought of the analogy as it's pretty straightforward in a lot of ways. The only thing that's different is the medium. So it doesn't really answer your question, but that's how we approached it.
Chastity Russell would like us to know that Zoom allows you to record each meeting. So I guess it's possible to retroactively go back over meetings between mentors and mentees.
Sure, and one more thing, when it comes to Zoom, there is the capability for you to create breakout sessions within a group sort of meeting, and so you're able to, and I'm not sure how able you are to specifically connect one user to another into a breakout session. But within those breakout sessions, as a moderator and as a Zoom meeting creator, you're able to go through those breakout sessions in sort of individual or invisible sort of way. So you're able to, as a moderator, check all of your breakout sessions without sort of entering the chat or entering that breakout session visually or with audio. So I don't know if that helps anyone, but Zoom does offer that for folks who do pay for. I'm actually not sure what the exact pricing of that tier in order to get that ability to do that, but I know that they do have breakout sessions.
Excellent. I have a whole bunch of questions and comments. I also have a few people who have raised their hands. I think I'm going to unmute someone to see what they have to say. Ashley Smoot Baker, you're at the top of the list. So I'm going to unmute you. I think you need to also unmute yourself. Ashley, let me know if you are able to talk. Okay, maybe how about Julie Gehrig? Are you able to talk, Julie?
They have to unmute themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. I am.
Well, go ahead and if you can, just ask another question while we're on.
I think I figured it out. This is Julie. I just wondered if any organizations had success with a match initiation that pair mentees and mentors in a one-to-one capacity.
If anyone has any ideas, you can respond in the questions box or raise your hand to speak. Let's see. Chazzy Russell is raising their hand. I can unmute you, Chazzy.
Hi, this is Chazzy Russell with Youth Action Project. So for us, we actually had large pieces of paper. We put the mentor's name on top, and we allowed the mentees and students to actually choose their own mentor. Virtually what that looks like is you could have either a Google Doc that you have the mentor's name, and the mentees, if they are logging in, if they have access, I'm not sure how the school district works for your organization, but the student can actually pick their mentor by just putting their name on there. So that's just one option. I did want to chime in on the safety issue. Something that has worked effectively for us is that we created norms and expectations for our mentors that they have to sign regarding all expectations dealing with students and when it comes to safety. We also, as stated before, we have recorded Zoom meetings, but part of those expectations is that they know that we're here to reestablish reestablish relationships with them and rapport, and to build a sense of trust, but to also let them know that it is confidential, but it is recorded, and that because we are mandated reporters, we do have to report if they are to harm themselves or someone else, but to let them know that this is still a safe haven for them, that they can disclose things, but just know that it is recorded. We also created a student survey that allowed them to be able to express what their needs are. So some of the questions are, how are you doing during COVID? Do you miss school? Do you or your family have current needs? And then we have like food and shelter and different examples, counseling or a mentor. And that has given us a great foundation of what the students actually need, and then being able to connect them to the resources in the community that's going to help them and serve them. So that's work that's confidential.
Great. I think you have something to, in the chat box you want to share out, Jolene?
Is Jolene muted again? Let me check. She is, sorry. Go ahead, Jolene.
Okay, so we have had a lot of success doing our one-on-one mentoring matches over Zoom. We always do that initial match with the mentor, the child, and the parents in a home visit situation before and have them all meet to make that initial match. We've just moved that to Zoom, and we've had several what we've done in the last month and a half where we in this situation, and it seemed to work just great to have it over Zoom, to have the mentee on, their parents, and the site coordinator, and go through the initial questions and the talk and everything that we do in our normal initial match. That's after the mentor is screened and everything. But so it's still working really good for us just to do it over Zoom.
Excellent. I'm going to go to Joyce next. Her hand has been raised for a while. Thank you for your patience, Joyce. You should be able to go ahead. You might have to unmute yourself first. Okay, I will move on to the next person who wants to talk. Stephanie Ball watched Tina, said that she could help answer the question about match initiation. Let me just find your name. Stephanie, you can go ahead. Okay, Stephanie, it looks like you have a green mic, but I can't hear you. How about I read another question from the question box? Oh, Stephanie. Oh, Stephanie says she's muted again. Okay, Stephanie, try again.
Hi there. Stephanie from Spectrum Family Services Community-Based Mentoring Program. We serve young people 12 to 22. And we've just started doing our virtual match meetings for pairs that we had ready, mentors that had already been background checked and trained, etc. So we did a match meeting this week, and we're doing one next week. And what we did was provided both mentor and mentee with the mentoring contract to either be signed virtually, or we'll snail mail them and get back to the contract. But we, for the most part, have held the match meetings on Zoom, similar to the way that we would hold them in person. And the one that we had earlier this week went really well. There was a young person who was over 18, so we needed no other permission than her own to execute the match meeting, and she was very invested in getting matched and very open to sharing during the initial meeting. So there wasn't a whole lot of awkwardness around conversing with her mentor, and they both were so excited to get started that it went really fluidly. The match meeting we're doing next week is with a 16-year-old, so ensuring that parent or guardian is on board 100% with them starting off virtually, but they really mirror the in-person match meetings outside of the fact that we're not sitting and signing the mentoring contract together in person.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
We have time for probably one more question or and a couple of answers.
Sure. Why don't I? Someone has a question. Ariella Rosenberg has a question about connecting with parents and caregivers and supporting them as they find themselves in the role of helping their kids connect to their mentor. This might be specifically relevant for those who work with younger kids. panelists can speak or if anyone raising their hand. Can't tell if anyone's raising their hand. No.
We actually will. This is Denny from Mentor. We actually are going to dive a little deeper into that topic of supporting families holistically in our third webinar on May 14th. And so we'll have some additional resources and content there. We know that, you know, there are programs who are leveraging staff time and volunteer time to provide some instrumental supports, you know, things like food distribution or connecting folks to unemployment and sometimes aiding and assisting in that way. And calling guardians and families directly to have conversations with them about how the program can be supportive. And so a lot of mentoring programs are being creative in that way by interacting directly with the parents, sort of asking about their needs, and then based on what they can do within the context of their community, providing those kinds of supports. And we'll have more information on that related to holistic aid as well as health during the third webinar on May 14th.
That's great. This is Bethany again. In the meantime, I can share two things that we have been doing. One is we put as much content into Spanish as possible. I lost my headphones from there. Sorry. We have parent portals where parents can go and get information, and we've done that in both English and Spanish. You can see the most sophisticated one is at athome.dcscores.org, and you can click on Espanol. Two is we have tried through all of our means of connecting with families. Normally, we are often communicating with parents via social media. We know a lot of them follow us on our social media accounts. And so we're putting out and reposting school and community information about food centers and school access and deadlines, trying to just kind of be that information conduit. Three, built into our coach phone call tips are a check-in with the parent first, right? So it's not like, hey, I'm so-and-so, your mentor's kid there. It's, hey, parent, we want to check in on you and your family. How are you guys doing? Have a conversation and then get to the kid. And that illuminates some of those issues that he was just talking about. We can identify, okay, is there a family that has a particular dire need, and then try to help them through that.
Okay, Michelle Thomas is sharing that the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement is offering free professional memberships at this time, and she shared a link. And I'm going to, compile all the questions and all the resources people have sent, so that we can share them with you. And we have time for one more question. How are programs dealing with closure, whether it's a school program that's closing or the kids are graduating? How are you making sure that the matches end in a positive manner that feels like the kids weren't suddenly cut off? Anyone can raise their hand, or anyone on the panel can speak.
So this is Bethany again. I'll dive back in. Hopefully y'all can hear me a little bit better. Sorry about that tech problem I had a moment ago. For us, most of our schools closed temporarily when they shut down. And that gave us just enough time to figure out how to pivot to reach out to families and say, hey, we're still here. So even though we didn't resume our traditional mentor group meetings, in some cases for many weeks, we reached out to families as quickly as possible to say, hey, we're still here. We got stuff coming your way. Here's some information in the meantime. And just keeping that line of communications open for us with the parents, the guardians, keeping that line of communications open with them and with the mentors who are in much closer contact often with the mentees is really important. One of the things that we started doing pretty early on in some of our cities was holding weekly conversations with all of our mentors. So basically, we open it up, we share where we're at, and then we spend half an hour getting feedback from them about what's going on. And that two-way interaction was very helpful to make that transition.
Thank you so much, Bethany. And after any last minute comments on that, it's 2:50, so I think we're just about out of time for questions.
All right, great. Thank you so much. You can go to the next slide for me, please. All right, so thank you so much for your participation and community during today's call. We are all in this together, and we encourage you all to lean on one another and reach out to us as we continue to navigate next steps in facing this challenge. We want to conclude by highlighting a few key next steps. You can go to the next slide for me. All right. Please share and register for our upcoming calls in this webinar series. Next week, we will share more about how organizations are navigating change internally, in addition to making decisions around how best to serve youth and families. In our third call, we will dive deeper into a dialogue about the health needs of our communities and how organizations are working to provide a diverse range of aid and instrumental supports to meet concrete needs like food distribution and access to Wi-Fi/laptops. Please let us know if you are also interested in sharing during these calls. We will figure out a different kind of way to actually do our question and answer, since this webinar does not allow for chat functioning. Next slide, please.
And I just want to hop in. A few people have said they've had difficulty registering for the second webinar, the May 7th one. I'll make sure I send out the registration link again, just in case.
Great, thank you. All right, for questions not answered and topics not covered today, again, review our page that you see up on the screen. Submit the survey. We really need your input. Our recently launched second survey is geared towards collecting up-to-date information about your financial needs, stories around the impact your mentors are having, the partnerships and advocacy you are involved in, and the diverse types of supports being provided to the youth you serve. The deadline for completing the survey is 5 p.m. Eastern, Friday, May 8th. We will aim to connect people, do our best to connect you with your peers, and get back with you as soon as we can. Feel free to email us at info@mentoring.org and follow us on social media, where you can find things like our Mentor Minute series on LinkedIn and Twitter and Mentor National. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see you and hear from you next week. And thanks again to all our panelists for today.